Well, I'm so glad you're joining me again as we trek through the Word of God. We are in the Minor Prophets this year, as you know, working our way through them chapter by chapter. My goal is to get you reading the chapter, not me reading it for you. So I'm just giving you, acting as a guide here for you to get in the Word yourselves. Today we're in a short book, just 21 verses, the book of Obadiah. Obadiah means the Lord's servant. That's what that name means. And I've titled Obadiah, "Those who curse you, I will curse." That's kind of a allusion to Genesis 12, verse 3, where God gives that warning that those who curse Israel, they themselves will be cursed. The context we're looking at here is prophetic. So this is a future alliance that Edom is going to have with the nation of Babylon. So they are going to ally themselves with Babylon and participate in the attack on Jerusalem. And they're going to be judged for that. If you want to see some of the background, you can go back to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 35, verses 1 through 15. And see some of the background to this alliance. But the book itself gives us really a lesson in what Genesis 12:3 means. In that verse, after making a covenant with Abraham, God gives him some security by saying that, Abraham, those who curse you, that these other nations that come against my nation, that curse you, I will curse. Two different words used in that verse for curse. When it says that the nations who curse you, God's talking about just a disrespect. If they just disrespect Israel, they diss them verbally, for example, then God will curse that nation. And the word he uses the second time for curse is essentially severely curse, bring down a ton of bricks on them. So it doesn't take much for much of an offense against Israel for God to come to their rescue. And that's what we see here. Also want to just highlight the fact of, in terms of introduction of the book, that this is a prophecy against Edom, but it's for Israel. Now, why do I say that? So it's for Edom in the sense that this is God's rehearsal, his prehistory, his prophecy about what's going to happen to that nation because of their alliance with Israel's enemies. It's for Israel in the sense that it's preserved for them. It's given to them by a prophet. It's preserved in their holy book in the Old Testament, the Torah, as a reminder that God is for them. It's a reminder that God has not abandoned them, that he will keep his covenant with them, that Abrahamic covenant. So it's important to keep that in mind as we think through this. 4 sections in this short book. It starts out in first couple verses, the reality of judgment, verses 1 through 9. And in verses 10 through 14, the reason for judgment. Verses 15 through 18, the record of the coming judgment. So notice it's a record of what's coming. This is a prophecy. This is prehistory. And then finally, it closes with restoration. So let's take a look at this. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord God concerning Edom. So this is a vision that God has pronouncing judgment on Edom, but he calls the nations to witness this. He sent an envoy to be sent among the nations. Arise and let us go against her for battle. So he's summoning the nations here to witness what he's about to do. And the problem in verses 2 and 3 is Edom's arrogance. Their arrogance has caused them to think that, they're invulnerable. Edom lives in a rocky, cliff-strewn area. What they've done is they've built their homes high up on the cliffs, so thinking that they can defend themselves against any adversary. So they're arrogant. They have a certain amount of arrogance that causes them to think that they're going to be safe. And God's warning them in verses 2 and 3. Edom, the arrogance of your heart has deceived you. You who lift live in the clefts of the rock, who say in your heart, who will bring me down to earth? Though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down. At the end of verse 4, says the Lord. Like verse 5 and 6, when it gives them, continues in this warning of them, the warning of their judgment, the reality of it that's coming. Verses 5 and 6 basically say that if thieves came, thieves come to steal from their homes, or thieves come to steal from their fields, the thieves would be kinder to them than what they're going to experience. This word translated ransack means to search through. What's going to happen is their ally, Babylon, is going to turn out to be their enemy ultimately. And then Babylon is going to search through all their possessions and take what they want. They're not going to leave anything. And they're going to be ransacked. Their allies in verses 7 through 9 are going to deceive them. God's going to make their Edom's leaders impotent. Their protectors are going to cave before their enemies. And they're going to suffer consequence. So basically the picture that's drawn here is that Edom is going to align themselves with Babylon. Babylon and Edom are going to attack Jerusalem and the southern kingdom. They're going to be successful, and then Babylon is going to turn on the much weaker Edom. Edom, who thinks that they're so safe, are going to find out that no, they're not. Verses 10, then, we begin the reason for judgment. And we've seen this over and over again, that God is not arbitrary, that he tells why he's judging, that he gives the reasons for the judgment. And we see multiple reasons here. Verse 10, it's violence against Jacob, quote unquote. He's talking about Israel here, the southern kingdom specifically. Violence against them. They stood aloof, separate, while their people were in need, while Israel was in need. They should have helped them, but instead they cursed them by their aloofness. In verse 11, they participated in the ransacking of Jerusalem, and they themselves are going to be ransacked as a result. They gloat, which means to rejoice, or they have certain level of relishing over the misfortune of Judah. They loot Jerusalem, they kill the runaways, those running away, or they enslave them. And God sees everything that's happening. He is a witness to that. They are not hidden. And God is going to respond, just as Genesis 12:3 says he will respond. Again, a warning for Edom, but ultimately a promise of vindication for Israel, that he is not going to abandon them. We then see the record of the coming judgment in verses 15 through 18. So this is prehistory, right? This is a prophecy. Prophecy is history ahead of time. So he is seeing what's going to happen in this future day of the Lord, which we've seen before in the other prophets, a term where God reaches into history and sets things right. It brings justice to the earth. And we see that here, that there's going to be a coming day when Edom is judged. And it's going to be according to a particular standard. Look at verses 15 to 16. He says that for the day of the Lord draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. So this is going to be proportionate. You ransacked my people, you yourselves are going to be ransacked. You tore down my city, well, you're going to be torn out of your cliffside dwelling places. You killed and you led into exile, that's going to happen to you. This is an eye for an eye that's happening here. It's called talionic judgment, is the fancy word. Talionic judgment that's going to fall on Edom. But look at verse 17. Notice how it begins with but there. This is a contrast. In contrast to that talionic judgment that's going to come on the nation of Edom, on Mount Zion there will be those who escape. It will be holy. And the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. So he's looking forward to some sort of restoration that's coming, that the Edom is going to be judged, but Israel is going to be vindicated. And we see this over and over in the day of the Lord, a day of judgment and a day of vindication. There's going to be a faithful remnant on Mount Zion who have come out of captivity. That's what verse 17 is saying. I think that was partially fulfilled, near-term fulfillment with return from Babylon, from exile that we see in Nehemiah and Ezra, in those books. Ultimately, it's going to be in the future when the Messiah comes, reigns in Jerusalem, and the nation is gathered back into the land in fulfillment of all the covenants that God has made with them. So there's a near term and a future sort of fulfillment that's coming. Sorry, I was looking at my notes here. And then in verse 19, we see not the day of the Lord, but the ultimate restoration of Israel, beginning in verse 19 and going through 21. The Negev is the area south of Jerusalem. It's a desert area. Those are the Negev, that is, those who are in the south are going to possess the mountain of Esau. They will take over that land. Those are the Shephelah. The Shephelah is foothills. That's what that means. They are going to possess the Philistine plain. So this is the area adjacent to the Mediterranean Sea. So that's the south. That's the western side. Benjamin will possess Gilead. That's in the north and a little bit to the west. East, the exiles of the host of the sons of Israel who are among the Canaanites, they will possess the cities of the Negev. So this is talking about a general return here. Look at verse 21. The deliverers will ascend Mount Zion. So this is recalling those days when there was a temple there. There will be a temple again, and they will go up the temple to worship. There'll be worship restored there. The nations are going to be streaming to Israel according to Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, to get the judgments of the king. And the kingdom will be the Lord's. So this is ultimately looking forward, not to that partial restoration that we see in Ezra and Nehemiah, but rather the ultimate restoration that we see Jesus bringing his kingdom in chapters 19 and 20 of Revelation, and then ultimately handing that kingdom over to the Father for the eternal kingdom, the eternal state, chapters 20 through 22 of the book of Revelation. So Obadiah here then is lamenting, warning, giving a history of what's going to happen in the near term and in the long term. And again, as we've seen over and over, that God demonstrates that what he can do locally to Edom, what he can do locally in Israel, he is ultimately going to be able to do globally in those final last days, that ultimate day of the Lord. So God bless you, brothers and sisters. Hope you enjoyed the book of Obadiah, one chapter, one book knocked out in one day. Next time, we'll be starting in the book of Jonah, favorite book of mine. But like I said, my favorite book in the Bible is the one I'm studying at the time. But we'll be having a good time in the book of Jonah. God bless you.